Welcome to Talking Ship. I'm Zoe Hanson, your host, and on this episode, I am joined by the effervescent John Wills, Director of Customer Experience at Shipnet, and Niall Jack, Director of Product as well.
Hello.
What does that mean then, Director of Product?
What does that mean? I do a bit of everything at Shipnet, but my ultimate responsibility is taking ideas, innovations from our customers and delivering products that they will use to make their business more efficient.
So you didn't start off in shipping, but you've sort of, I suppose, always been on the water, it sounds. Tell us your story.
So I have a bit of a strange background, I suppose. I studied computer science originally, and then decided what I really wanted to do was not work in IT. So I went to sea. I worked in shipping. I was a navigator, a deck officer for 7 or 8 years.
But even that transition. So
yes, yeah.
How did you even get into that navigation role?
I liked it. I liked the idea of shipping just from the off, really. It's always interested me since I was a kid. I like boats. I like ships. I just thought it was fascinating. And then when I saw the opportunity to go to sea and travel the world, see the world, sort of move huge cargoes all over the place, I thought this is actually quite fascinating. I didn't want to work in an office. That's the core reason.
And so you did the exact opposite.
Yes, about as far away as I could. That lasted for a few years, and here we are now.
So what did you do when you were off and being a navigator? Talk us through what your sort of day-to-day and where you went.
Yep, so I was a deck officer. I worked worldwide on oil and gas tankers mostly, passenger ferries as well in the Irish Sea for a very short period of time. But as a deck officer, you're responsible for navigating the vessel, safety on board, and the kind of day-to-day cargo operations of the ship. So nothing engineering related. I was quite keen not to be in the engine room, but up on the bridge, driving the ship. That's the job.
So you're having this amazing time. You're away at sea. You're navigating. You're doing all these brilliant things and seeing all these amazing places. Why then come ashore?
Yeah, I mean, I think the final straw for me was towards the sort of tail end of COVID. I should have been away for 2 months. I was stuck for about 6 months. Couldn't get home. I think what really frustrated me is we saw, holiday flights going on. I was working in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. We saw flights coming and going, and we said, well, can we get home? We work on these ships that we were taking jet fuel to the airports for the tourist flights.
Right.
And they said, oh, no, it's too risky. You might have COVID. And I thought, right, okay. So after 5 months of that, I thought, no, I'm ready to go and try and make an impact somewhere else.
Even the Caribbean, you can have enough of it, right?
Yes, yeah, we spent 2 or 3 months at anchor at Antigua, which was lovely, but there's only so much sunshine a Scot can put up with, really.
I'd just like to point out, I know people who got stuck in COVID in like Arctic Circle ports in Archangel and up like there. I think they would probably contest your argument that there is only so much sun that they can take. So I'm pretty sure one of them still has frostbite, but
yeah, I know. And to be fair, that there's people that were stuck for much longer, for years. Even seafarers were stuck on their ships, and I was lucky compared to them. But for me, I'd had enough. As soon as I had my chance, I took it.
And actually, that's something that I've never thought about. I thought about people being stuck because they'd been on holiday or they were flight crew or whatever, but. Again, this is sort of that shipping is the missing bit. It's the bit that people sort of not necessarily ignore, but take for granted. That's what it is. You take it for granted.
And I mean, just to chip in here, I'm not a mariner. I've been on board ship, but I've never worked on board a ship, and I've never sailed, on a cargo ship. And I think the thing that a lot of people do miss, and it's one of the reasons why we hire people who have strong maritime backgrounds, is that the working conditions on board ships can be absolutely atrocious. And we joke about Neil getting stuck on board a ship in the Caribbean, but it's not like a cruise ship. It's not like a holiday. You're stuck on board ship. You're working day in, day out. You've got no chance to get off. You don't know when it's going to end. That's unusual in this instance because of COVID, but that's a working reality for lots of people. And actually that sympathy with the lot of the seafarer, particularly around the fact that commercial shipping is still, by comparison, a very dangerous industry to work in. It's a sort of sensibility that we do try and bring to the products. It's one of the reasons why Neil does what he does for us in this business. That's a fair comment, isn't it?
I would say so. Yeah. Okay.
And how has that landscape sort of changed, I suppose, since you first went away to sea?
I suppose when I first went to sea, I mean, it wasn't even that long ago. So 2015, I started working at sea, and the attitude, we talk about digitisation. If I'm being honest, there wasn't much of it in 2015. People just didn't invest in digital schemes. I mean, I think there's always been a concerted effort to be more safe. But over the last 2 or 3 years, I think there really has been a sort of awakening to, well, we have all this information, we just need to start looking at it and
take it out of a book.
Yeah, and let data drive our decisions. That's the key. It's very hard to do on a ship, on an individual level, but when you have the kind of fleet overview, it becomes more feasible. And for me, I mean, that's part of the reason that I came to Shipnet was, I've always been interested in improving safety and kind of working on board because of my experience. And I saw we had this opportunity to do something quite interesting with all the systems that Shipnet have. And that's where we have our Helix has emerged from that sort of idea. And
I suppose maybe you've come full circle then, because not only are you working in shipping, but that computer studies is sort of all come to fruition as well. Yeah. So when I came ashore, in my previous job, I worked as a developer and spent a lot of time working on sort of naval architecture type software. Really, really interesting, like really clever bunch of people. We worked on some really cool things. But for me, Shipnet was moving back to my sort of roots, if that makes sense, which is less naval architecture, less engineering, more seafaring. So what kind of insights and what kind of real life experiences do you draw on to bring to Shipnet, to bring to Helix? I guess in general terms, and it would go for any of the product managers, the users of our product are people at sea, and that brings its own sort of unique range of challenges, all sorts of nationalities, various degrees of IT literacy. How can we build products that help them do their job and help them work more safely, work more efficiently? If we can cross that barrier at sea, that's a big step in the right direction. I think there's also a practical thing here as well. So one of the challenges that lots of shipping companies have is getting people to report accidents. Right. So, obviously nobody wants to have accidents, but if you have an accident, you need to mine the detail to see if you can stop that recurring and impacting more people. Particularly, if it's a trip or a slip, it might just be good fortune that somebody's not been seriously injured. Yeah. So crossing this kind of almost digital divide, getting somebody who maybe isn't a native systems user or a native English speaker to report things accurately so the collective becomes safer is a challenge. And this is one of the things that we've driven. And we've kind of driven this thinking forward in some of the web apps that we delivered. Increasingly, we're asking people to use mobile phones. Yeah. So don't go sit at an office and do the admin, because the admin often doesn't get done. But if you can capture an event, a slip or a trip, or if you can report an accident quickly and easily off the mobile phone, which is the de facto device for seamen across the world now, then all of a sudden you're contributing more data to the communal resource. Yeah. Which means that the guys ashore see the likely hazards, they can do the root cause analysis, they can put the corrective action in place, and the sea gets a little bit safer for everybody. And then all of that information, I suppose, is sort of shared across the board as well. It's kind of hit or miss in shipping. Shipping's such a secretive industry. So, knowledge is power. And this goes back, back to the olden days when it was kind of, you don't tell anyone where your ship's going, don't tell people what cargo you have, and you can optimize, how much you sell it for, essentially. Has that changed then? A little bit. There's a lot more data around that. Sort of shipment data it's out there from other sources. Yeah. Safety is always a tricky one because there's real incentive to not have accidents. So if you report loads of accidents, people will assume that your ships are unsafe, which is probably not fair in a lot of cases. If you have a very strong safety culture on board, you do report these things, you do investigate them, and you do improve. But there's a real temptation just not to report and avoid the paperwork, which is something we're really, really keen to kind of to move away from. And in fairness, we tend to work with ship owners and operators that we would, internally we call them progressive. These are people who aren't threatened by having a whole bunch of near-miss reports submitted because they know actually the near-miss reports are the raw material. There are companies out there that I think we would probably take
a moral decision that we would be less than happy working with, because the outcomes they seek aren't aligned with what we think makes for good business. Because we've got a reputation and a brand to uphold as well.
Yeah, of course.
And if we end up being the people that sell cheap, barely useful but compliant solutions to ship owners who are cheap and barely compliant, I don't think that's not the end of the market for us.
Not aligned with what we're doing. And you talked about sharing information. So one shipping company is probably not keen that another shipping company knows exactly what's happening on board. For all kinds of reasons. What we're quite keen at looking at is, well, what can we learn from the sum total of this resource without, we're not passing on information to other people, but there are learnings to be had there. And there are publications out there that do sort of anonymous reporting, and they're really good, but they're just quite limited in their scope. And, we're in a very unique position as an operator of a safety management system software to have all that information. So it's just what do we do with it?
So, like, practically speaking, so one of the things that Helix lets us do is look at the aggregated data. So, let's say we've got 20 customers on there and we've got 10,000 years worth of safety related data. We would never say, oh, customer A had this kind of accident, so customer B, C, D, and E, watch out. What we would be likely to say is, look, across all of the ships for whom we have data, we note that your fleet is reporting fewer near misses.
Right.
This leads us to believe that you may have a reporting issue. Therefore, there's a large volume of issues going unreported here, and this is probably a risk to your business.
Okay.
So, green, you're reporting about what we expect. Amber, you're slightly under. Red, you're a long way under what we'd expect, given the fact we can see loads of data on this. That's like a really handy prompt, because it's not necessarily the case that the ship owners or operators know that their people aren't reporting. How do you know that something's not happening? So that's one of the particular cases that when Neil was bringing forward ideas for product and we started talking about the data bucket that evolved into Helix, it was like, okay, well, how can we use everybody's data to help people understand the context for their own activities so they can improve or they can optimize or they can realize they're good enough and they don't need to worry about this now.
So what we see an awful lot of is if you own 5 ships, it's very, very hard to make assumptions about what's going on because you just don't have that much data. You might have 1 near miss a month, so 5 near misses, 60 a year. It's just not really enough to be able to know what's correct. But if we have thousands of ship years, we have thousands of data points, and then when we see machine learning, AI kind of come into the picture, we have enough data to start working with that technology and use it effectively. Which I think is key. It's very easy to misuse technology like that and it'll overfit. You'll get kind of bad results from AI and ML methods. But we have this sort of critical mass of data now.
Yeah, and that is very definitely a thing that we are hoping to see drive behaviour changes across the entire industry. Because I was astonished when I came into the marine industry, I think a year later than you, 2016, I think was my first position here. And it felt to me like I was stepping back in time, just the level of secrecy, the whole openness that the internet brought to every other industry, from like auctioneering, for eBay, for property transactions, for finance and record, all that kind of stuff. Shipping was sort of like, no, we don't tell anybody anything, and if we were to tell people anything, we'd tell them a deliberate lie to hide out. That was just completely not my background.
It's just archaic, really, isn't it?
It makes sense. There's great reasons for it because, shipping, all the numbers are big.
Yeah.
Costs of the asset, the cost of the fuel, the running cost, the returns on an individual voyage.
Well, it's competition, right?
But the margins are tight, so why give anything away that you don't need to? The problem is you get to a point where the lack of data, the lack of insight, the lack of context actually is a disbenefit for everybody. So when we talk about product at the macro level, which is the level I tend to deal with it in, we're always looking for things like how can we encourage people how can we reward people for being more transparent? Because transparency grows industries, and you see that across everything the internet touches. Auction houses before eBay was a microscopic slice of economic activity.
Absolutely.
Now it's vast, and eBay is just a transparency engine. So first principles product design, how can we reward people for doing the right thing, be it being more transparent, be it burning less fuel, be it being more straightforward in the way they manage safety. And then we iterate those first principles into products that are fully realized, like Helix.
Yeah, I think the real killer has always been that commercial level of secrecy being applied to the more technical areas of shipping, which would really benefit from not having that secrecy around them. So, I mean, we see sort of industry bodies, OCIMF and various schemes for vetting and assessment trying to break down, but that's still only one point in time, kind of a very fixed point. What can we do at the more granular level to provide transparency?
The interesting thing is whilst there's still elements of that culture of secrecy, which is sort of like a cultural thing, it's almost like people are afraid to break out of it subconsciously.
It's just what we do now.
Yeah. But when we went out and we started talking to people about Helix and saying, look, will you contribute this data to us so you can use it and you can learn all about your business, but we'll also start providing benchmarks so you'll have some context, and we'll share those benchmarks with everybody, although obviously we anonymise and no one will know which data is yours. Nobody said, no, I object to that on a philosophical level. Everybody was right. Okay, if you can anonymise it, then I'll gladly do it. And the way that we got that across the line is we said, well, look, you want to see this benchmark data, don't you? Mm-hmm. If you contribute, then we can do the benchmark. If you don't contribute, you don't get the benchmark.
Okay.
And, you spend $500 million a year on parts. Imagine if you could just take 1% off that. That's probably a down payment on a new ship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I say, at the macro, at that very top level of product, conceptualization and design, it's how do we incentivize people to do the right thing? And this one was just beautiful from the start. But would we have approached this in the way that we did without having somebody of Neil's background and sensibility come to the organization and say, look, how can we take the commercial confidentiality away from something that's essentially an industry-wide public good, the safety of seafarers? Never in a million years. And that's why we keep going to seafarers to bring them into a role shoreside that's about product.
Neil, what do you think that you bring? Maybe sort of your three most important things.
I'm too self-effacing for that. I think sometimes a bit of a reality check on what we're doing. Both at a technical level and on a kind of, practically, is this keeping us in the right direction? And I think that's a really important thing for anyone working in product, especially kind of B2B style products.
Because your role, you were part of developing Helix.
Yeah.
So how does that all sort of tie together?
Yeah, I mean, so my, I guess, day-to-day involvement after we kind of came up with the idea is to work with the developers and kind of do the architecture, infrastructure stuff and kind of push it out. So we have a really, really good team of developers working on it. A couple of really very motivated and skilled guys. Mm-hmm. Just keeping things ticking over and moving in the right direction. There's so many opportunities with Helix and the technology we use that we just need to keep moving. I think probably people have heard about Documents SE, our kind of AI-powered document management system. This similar kind of vein to that. We just want to keep trying new things and trying new technologies, and you find yourself running into success, which is a really nice a nice reward. And
actually, AI is one of the things that I wanted to ask about. So it I don't want to say it's taken over the world, but it is. AI must be so important in shipping. Just talk to me a bit about AI and how you guys use it or how you implement it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's such a, if we have to remember AI is a very big topic, right?
Yeah.
So we take very specific parts and apply them to very specific problems, which I think is key. I'm a bit of a pragmatist when it comes to this sort of thing because, I hear people saying, oh, AI will solve all the problems, don't worry about it. And I go, right, okay, but, what problem and how and what's the approach?
Yeah, somebody's got to identify it in the first place.
Yeah, so we've always been very problem-led in the way we develop things rather than solution-led. So, we did plenty of examples of people running with a really cool solution, searching for a problem. And that's a bit of a, it's difficult. It's really difficult to get that product market fit. But if you start with a problem, AI is a very powerful tool. So document management, large language models, kind of the ChatGPT style stuff, it's a no-brainer, right? It's you can have a next generation search across all your documents, all your policies, procedures. And it's commoditized, right? It's something that Microsoft developed and we just use. We use that technology to deliver value to our customers. What I'm really keen for is when we start looking at Helix, it's more structured numerical data. I mean, can we make predictions? Can we use kind of neural network style regression methods to make predictions, optimizations? That's a little bit more involved. We're not quite at the same commoditization stage.
Okay.
And it's just a subset of AI, but it's something with a lot of potential, I think.
I think the other thing that people say a lot about AI, and you're completely right, by the way, I'd say there are a group of people out there who say AI is the solution to everything. Don't worry about the detail, AI will solve it. And Neil is correct. When I say that, he says, yeah, but which problem, when, how? And so Neil does do that internal sanity check. But there are a group of products out there that have been trying to sort of roll their own AI and, to do things like predictive maintenance analysis. And all of those guys, my impression is, are being outstripped by the commodity stuff. So, Microsoft invests through OpenAI something like $100 million a day. I saw the number the other day. It's absolutely phenomenal crazy amount of money. And the idea that any independent software vendor, especially in maritime, where there's not the most money in the universe, can keep up with that kind of investment is an absolute joke. So we are shamelessly piggybacking on Elon Musk, on Satya Nadella, on all of the big guys who are ploughing money into this. And all we're doing is we're just taking it and going, do you see that one thing there? This will make our customers' lives better and maybe seafarers' lives better if we deploy it sensibly like this. And then when it's deployed, when it's integrated, we don't have to worry about it because every couple of months they roll out a new version and it gets exponentially better. And that benefit passes straight over to our customers at no cost on our part. Therefore, we don't charge them any more for it. Yeah. And that's that kind of product development philosophy I think we settled on quite early on here. It's how do we take commodity technology and use it to great effect to develop big value for customers without it costing the universe.
I mean, I think the most important thing is if we remember 2 or 3 years ago, people weren't really talking about AI in the same way as they are now. And what's going to come in the next 2 or 3 years, we really don't know. And for us, Helix, we talk about it as an infrastructure piece, is if you build the resource that will allow you to leverage whatever comes down the road, you're in a strong position.
Yeah.
But if you're left 5 years down the road desperately trying to get everything in order so you can use some revolutionary piece of AI technology, you're going to struggle. You're behind the curve.
You've started the marathon on the wrong day, haven't you? You're a day behind.
Late to the party,
Yeah. And actually, there's a really interesting piece in there about, so how are you improving seafarers' lives? How are you improving safety conditions?
Yeah. I mean,
what is going on?
I think the best example that we have running today is Documents SE. So anyone who's worked on a ship in a kind of administrative capacity, so any officer will have spent hours just searching through manuals, scrolling,
right.
Control F, search for words until you kind of find the thing you're looking for.
Yeah.
It's tough. But AI search or OpenAI is just given us this really, really good ability to ask the plain English question, sort of natural language question, and you get a really good result. And the software, the way we've developed it, we reference the piece of policy that we're pulling that from, so it's all kind of, you can verify what you're seeing, and it's, AI people, I think, sometimes think that it's something fantastical and magical, but it's actually, it's common sense in computing, I think. So huge oversimplification.
Usable.
So to give an example, and this is the thing that we tend to demo to people. So if I'm talking to a chief engineer, I'll say, okay, well, look, ask how you, change the oil filter on an auxiliary engine. Just say, how do I do that? How do I change the oil filter? And just types it into the little box in the same way you would do a Google search. What the product does is it goes off and it looks for the service manual, the consumables list, any particular relevant working instructions, because there are like regulations around working in enclosed spaces on ships to avoid things like carbon monoxide poisoning. And it pulls all of the data from those documents and assembles it into a checklist. First you must, then you will need to get this consumable, and it'll talk you all the way through it. And if at any point you think, well, I'm not sure I believe that bit, you can click on it and it'll take you to the source document and you can read what it actually did. So you can sort of sanity check the answer from the robot. And just something like that, not having to read 4, maybe 5 documents before you go and do a job, is not only a time saver, but it's also a safety factor. Because
because you're not going to read 54 pages of it.
I'm a dad. I've got 2 small kids. My DIY jobs are like a horror show. And my wife is always like, why are you not reading the instructions? I haven't got time to do the job and read the instructions. It's one or the other. So that sounds trivial, yeah, but it's something that makes everybody's life easier.
Yeah.
It means they read the bloody documents, and at the end of it, the job is done with minimised risk, because nothing's ever totally safe, particularly not on board a ship.
It simplifies the process.
It does. Yeah. And you can give that example to people who are chief engineers, you can give it to QHSE officers, you can give it to sailors, you can give it to the accountants back at head office, because each accident costs $45,000 to resolve. And every single person goes, yeah, we want in on this. That's good. And again, I won't mention any competitors, but when I look at the uses for LLM, AI, ChatGPT style things in shipping, I don't see anybody else taking such a practical and probably morally correct or morally beneficial route through this. So again, it comes from sensibility. We employ mariners, we get practical solutions that do the right things, but the benefits of those solutions are often bigger than we first think. Because all we really wanted to do is make a slightly better document management system.
Yeah, I mean, it saves time. That's the 5 minutes per person, 365 days a year, times 100 ships. Suddenly you're saving thousands of hours, and that's valuable. Time is money.
And it's efficient, and it's easier to understand, and you don't get anything missed. Because if it takes less time, you're more likely to do all of it, rather than, oh God, I've got to read this for 4 hours.
I'm always quite a strong advocate of saying that seafarers want to work safely, right? People aren't setting out with the intention of having an accident in the morning. So, if we can do anything to kind of prompt safety, that's a good thing. So we talked about anomaly detection in, are you filling out enough near miss reports? Is the quality high enough as judged by benchmarking or AI or whatever? If all that generates is an email to the master of the vessel saying, just we're a little bit, what's going on? That email is the prompt that will improve safety. AI's not done anything there. Technology's not done anything. It's still that personal link that, just take care. And that helps. People just need a prompt sometimes.
Yeah. And just a sort of like at a business level, I can probably name 2 or 3 startups that have folded in the last 2 years, where I think the technology has determined the value proposition rather than the actual value proposition determining the technology.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I don't think you get with the sort of Aravist startups, because 4 or 5 years ago we were seeing startups arrive in the maritime space, often funded by people like Microsoft, at a rate of knots. You get a 30 million startup grant from Microsoft, and then they come in and they're going to solve all these big problems, and then sort of like 4 or 5 years down the line, after another $100 million has gone in, they go bust. Because there's not that cultural alignment between the technology guys and the marine guys.
Well, they're trying to find the solution to the problem. I think it's that sort of what you said earlier, Neil. It's searching for the problem, because we've got the solution, but what do we hook it up to? And how does this sort of increase the ability to analyse all of those sort of real life outcomes for those at sea?
I think if we're talking about Helix and kind of big data, which is what it is, the most powerful thing we could possibly do is give the data to the experts, right? So, I've worked at sea. I kind of know how ships work. I know what they do. I know how the trade works, all that sort of stuff. But I'd be kidding myself if I said I know more about health and safety than somebody whose job is to sit and analyse, what's going on in my 12 ships. They know. They're the experts. Of course. So all we really set out to do as a kind of first deliverable is, well, I want that person to be able to connect and see everything in a really easy, readable way. So they don't have to come to us. They don't really need to work with us. They just connect whatever tool they want. And that's entirely up to the customer. So if they want to use some advanced reporting or insight tool, they can and they should. If they want to use something really simple or they want us to help them, we can do all that too. But really giving all the information to the experts is the key. That's where we see the kind of next level insights, because there's so much you can tell. We just don't know what the data will tell us, and all we can do is try and speed up the discovery process, and the easiest way to do that is give it to the experts.
Sorry for the pun, but get on board, right?
Pretty much. I mean, it kind of goes back to we talked about digital natives. As time goes by, the kind of next generation of people moving into these jobs are comfortable working with Power BI or do know how to code a little bit.
Right.
So, we have to, as a supplier, give them the ability to kind of run with the information. I just don't think it's acceptable for a business like ours, an ERP style business, to say, it's difficult to access your data in this way.
Yeah,
and it's not efficient either, is it? It's not going to do anybody any favours.
Again, we're all here to improve safety, to improve efficiency. And if experts want to do that, we're here to help.
There's also a history that really shocks me, actually, when I came in to the maritime industry 8-9 years ago, which was you'd have to pay your suppliers of like hardware kit vast sums of money for them to give you the data that you were generating. So I did
your data.
Yeah, I did several projects where, we'd have to pay a certain Norwegian equipment manufacturer about $25,000 just to give us access to the data for the machinery that we'd bought off them already. So, when Neil says it's about giving people access to data so they can do something, there's a bigger couple of pictures in here for me. One is around transparency, like what's the common value of that data? That data is a common good for the entire industry, right?
Yeah.
But the other one is about democratization. Why should data be kept in a walled garden that you are charged essentially an extortionate amount of money to access when you did it? You paid for the equipment that generates that data. You paid for the fuel that drove those engines or those fuel pumps. That shouldn't be an optional extra. It should be something that's baked into the value proposition. If you come and deal with us, you will get access to all your data all the time. So at all times, you know what you're doing. And what we really want to see is a sort of transformation. Systems like ours help people do their job day to day. But if you've got access to all the data, you can improve your business with each day's worth of data that comes along. So an ERP solution or any software solution stops being a cost of doing business and starts being a driver for change that can be transformative. Because if you find the right information and you understand the right information, you give it to the right people, all of a sudden your accident rate can plummet, your commercial earnings can go up, your fuel consumption can go right down, your carbon intensity drops as an organization. It's a big bucket of data in the sky, is Helix, but in the right hands, with the right tools, with the right incentives applied, you can do really amazing things with that. And that's not hyperbole. That's what every other industry that's gone through digitization has gone through. And in our own little way, we're kind of trying to nudge shipping down the same way.
Yeah, it's kind of commoditized. So everyone at that shipping company has access to the data. So instead of just having one point of contact with Shipnet, they specify a dashboard that they'd like. We just say, well, everyone can have access, from the post-fixture analyst to the performance analyst, anyone. And you never know. You just never know who's sitting there behind the desk that can make some fantastic insight that'll save you 1% on some bill. And then you're talking millions, So Shipnet has gone from something that we pay for to do business to something that, through using Helix, we've saved loads of money. We're in the money,
Thank you, John, and thank you, Neil. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Now, we'd love to know what you think, so drop us a note in the comments. And thank you so much for listening to us talking ship.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.